The other day, I had the opportunity to visit the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. And as I told you guys earlier, it was an amazing show. And as I went through the museum, I experienced a myriad of emotions, everything from anger, sadness, joy, pain, pride. But I started the tour with the slave trade, and many of the exhibits stood out to me, but the one that stood out most was actually the exhibit about sugar. Yes, sugar. That sweet goodness that we eat every day. It can be found in almost everything we drink and eat today. You see, sugar was the main driver of the slave trade. And I don't know if I never heard that or if this was something that I learned and I forgot, but sugar was more important than gold. As a matter of fact, the British called it white gold. The amount of sugar produced by the enslaved workers was 90%. The slaves produced 90% of the world's sugar, yet the life expectancy for a slave on a sugar plantation was 7 years. 7 years. At the beginning of the slave trade, ships carried sugar to Britain in the amount of 200,000 tons. But at the height of the slave trade, the amount of sugar that was transported from the Americas and this region back to Britain was over 175 billion tons. There were many quotes in the museum that stood out, but the one that stood out most to me was a quote from one of the slave merchants. And I want to read it to you because I want to make sure I get it right. The slave merchant was named William Cooper, and it's spelled C-O-W-P-E-R. He said, "I admit I am sickened at the purchase of slaves, but I must be mum, for how could we do without sugar or rum?" What was even more telling is that this Cooper was a psalmist, and he wrote two of my favorite hymns. The first one was, "God moves in mysterious ways, and there is a fountain filled with blood." That's quite the paradox, and I'm still digesting it. However, that's a video for another day. But it just goes to show you the great disconnect that people had. You know, America was formed as a Christian nation, yet they had no trouble enslaving people so that they could make millions off the backs of slaves. And it was shrouded in the fact that, you know, we've got to do this because we can't do without sugar and rum. That's more important than lives. Just amazing. The thing that stands out to me most was that sugar was killing Africans at that time, and sugar is still killing African Americans at a greater rate than any other race, even today. Although the deaths caused by sugar today, the reason is due to overconsumption. African Americans are 1.7 times more likely to have diabetes than non-Hispanic whites. 13.2% of African Americans aged 20 or older have been diagnosed with diabetes. Diabetes leads to such debilitating diseases and conditions such as heart disease, blindness, kidney failure, and even limb amputations. The correlation strikes me as dreadfully ironic. Our lives were considered nothing in the pursuit of sugar. And now today it seems that we barely consider our lives today as well in the consumption of sugar. That should not be. British and slave traders were addicted to the profit, and today we are addicted to the taste. As history tells us time and again, addictions can be deadly. We had no control over the slave trade, but we do have control over what we consume and what we put into our bodies today. We've got to make better choices.